IJN Kako is a Tier 3 battle rating 4.7 heavy cruiser in the Japanese tech tree. It's one of the 4 cruisers at battle rating 4.7 in all of War Thunder, making it uniquely powerful due to its matchmaking. For a bit of history on the ship, IJN Kako was the second ship of the Furutaka class heavy cruisers. She was laid down in 1922 and commissioned by 1926. The initial fit had 6 200mm 3rd-year Type 1 cannons in 6 single cannon turrets, while a 1933 fit swapped them out for 6 200mm 3rd-year Type 2 cannons in 3 dual turrets. Kako was sunk by the US submarine S-44 after the Battle of Savo Island, taking 3 torpedoes and then sinking within 5 minutes. In War Thunder, Kako comes in its early loadout with 6 200mm 3rd-year Type 1 cannons split into 6 single turrets. These have a fire rate of 4 shells per minute, lowering to 3 shells per minute after the ready racks are depleted, which carry 10 shells per cannon. They also have worst-in-class dispersion, making it difficult to consistently hit targets at longer ranges or to even precisely hit them at close range. Luckily, the shells it gets are pretty powerful. Kako has 2 shell types, HE and AP. The HE shells have a very high amount of filler, being particularly effective against destroyers and other small targets. Even with a poor hit, they're still likely to deal major damage, which helps to offset Kako's dispersion. The AP shells are individually very powerful, having excellent penetration and filler. The lack of accuracy holds them back from dealing with cruisers effectively since they can't target specific internal segments consistently, but when these shells hit, at least they deal a lot of damage. It's worth bringing mostly HE to spam at longer ranges, and then some APC for dealing with cruisers at shorter ranges. Next up are Kako's secondary weapons, 4 120mm cannons in 4 single turrets, and 4 13.2mm machine guns in 2 dual mounts. The 120mm cannons have a fire rate of up to 22 shells per minute per cannon, and have HE and HETF ammunition. The HE shells are surprisingly good for manually dealing with pesky patrol boats and destroyers that get too close, while the HETF shells are Kako's primary anti-air defense. Both shell types are worth bringing, and they both make up for some of Kako's weaknesses. The 13.2mm machine guns aren't very useful due to limited arcs of fire and generally being a bit weak. Overall, Kako's secondary cannons are really lacking, leaving it very vulnerable to aircraft. Last up for Kako's weaponry comes 24 Type 8 torpedoes in static torpedo tubes, with 6 torpedo tubes on each side of the hull and each carrying 1 reload. These have surprisingly good stats with a high top speed, high travel distance, and high filler. I would actually recommend leaving the torpedo mode modification off on these. The standard 10km range is more than enough in almost all circumstances, and the excessive range isn't worth going from 70 km per hour to 50 km per hour. These torpedoes are excellent for handling cruisers, which Kako can normally struggle with due to its poor accuracy, but they can only be fired by turning the entire hull of the ship, making them a bit harder to work with than usual. Just be sure to launch them before taking large amounts of fire, as carried torpedoes do tend to detonate quite easily nowadays. Next up for Kako's stats is survivability, where it's mostly carried by a very low battle rating. It has 419 crew and a 76mm belt over the boilers and transmission, but lacks any form of belt armor covering the ammunition. Interestingly, the ammunition is split with the magazines to port or on the left, and the shell rooms to starboard or on the right. Since War Thunder reverses the roles of the two, it's better to broadside the enemy with your left facing them, as the magazines deal far less damage upon detonating. As a cruiser at 4.7, its damage model is very resistant to destroyer weaponry, along with commonly facing ships that don't even have armor-piercing ammunition to deal with it properly. Overall, this makes Kako very survivable in matches, mostly since it's facing ships that just can't kill it efficiently. However, in an up tier it has relatively poor protection for a cruiser, so it does tend to be pretty weak then. Last up for Kako's stats comes mobility. With a top speed of 65 km per hour, Kako is average, keeping pace with most destroyers and cruisers. Overall, Kako is a short-range brawler that excels in killing destroyers. Its biggest advantage is its low battle rating, making it constantly face ships that can't easily kill it, and never having to face dreadnoughts or actual battle cruisers. When facing ships that can't easily penetrate it, try getting in close to minimize the effects of its inaccuracy and best use its torpedoes. The main threats to Kako are aircraft, torpedoes, and up tiers. With aircraft, there isn't really much that Kako can do. It simply needs to stay around squad mates or allied ships to deter attacks. It's a very obvious target since most players know that it has poor anti-air weaponry and is quite easy to hit, so going off alone is pretty much asking an aircraft to drop a bomb onto you. For torpedoes, just change headings occasionally and be careful around destroyers at close range. For torpedoes, just change headings occasionally and be careful around destroyers at close range. Destroyers tend to target the largest ships in a match, and as a 4.7 cruiser, Kako attracts a lot of attention. Lastly, for up tiers, there's really no counterplay. At that point, Kako is simply facing ships that are stronger than it can efficiently deal with. At most, try getting into very close range using map cover and then dropping massive amounts of torpedoes into enemy cruisers at short range where it's very difficult to dodge them. You can also roll the dice and try firing full salvos of arm-piercing ammunition into their shell rooms, though even at point blank the guns are pretty inconsistent. So, is Kako worth picking up? At the moment, yes, it's easy to play and commonly gets down tier to face vehicles that it really shouldn't be seeing, along with being part of the most fleshed out low tier blue water Japanese lineup with Akitsuki and Yugomo. Whether or not it's good is decided almost entirely by the battle rating of the match, then a bit of luck as to whether or not the enemy has armor-piercing ammunition or their own cruisers, but in the right situation it's very difficult to kill, and hence very powerful. For modification order, go for toolset, fire protection system, 200mm Type 88 APC, rudder replacement, 120mm Type 0 HE, shrapnel protection, ventilation, propeller replacement, ammo wetting, and engine maintenance. For crew skills, go for leadership, main caliber reload speed, crew interchangeability, fire prevention, ship control, and distance fuse set accuracy. Thank you for watching.